The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered wooden station, its wheels cutting fresh tracks through 3 inches of pristine snow that had no business falling in San Jose, California, even in the winter of 1881. Lydia Sawyer pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window, peering out at the unfamiliar town with equal parts dread and determination. Everything she owned in this world fit inside the single worn carpetbag clutched in her other hand. The telegram that had brought her across half the country was folded in her coat pocket. Creased from being read so many times, the paper had grown soft as fabric. Her brother's handwriting, those final words before the consumption took him, had promised her a fresh start, a job at the general store, a room above the mercantile. But that had been 4 months ago, and the second telegram, the one from the town doctor, had arrived just as she was boarding the train in Philadelphia. Her brother Thomas was dead. The job was gone. The room had been let to someone else. She had come anyway because there was nothing left for her back east except debts, and the cold charity of distant relatives who had made it clear she was a burden they could not afford. At 22 years old, Lydia found herself alone in the world with $17 to her name and hope that felt as fragile as the snowflakes melting against the stagecoach window. The driver opened the door, and cold air rushed in, stealing her breath. Lydia stepped down carefully, her worn boots finding purchase on the icy ground. The other passengers hurried toward the warmth of nearby buildings, but she stood there, uncertain, watching her breath form clouds in the winter air. San Jose was smaller than she had imagined. The main street lined with false-fronted buildings that looked like they were trying to be more impressive than they actually were. Through the falling snow, she could make out a saloon, a hotel, a church with a white steeple, and farther down, what might have been the general store her brother had written about. "Miss Sawyer." The voice came from behind her, deep and uncertain. Lydia turned to find a man standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands despite the cold. He was tall, with broad shoulders beneath a heavy wool coat, and a face that looked weathered by sun and wind despite appearing to be only a few years older than herself. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and his eyes were an unusual shade of blue-green that reminded her of the ocean on a stormy day. "Yes," she said, her voice catching slightly from cold and surprise. "I am Lydia Sawyer." "Fletcher Thornton, madam." He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I knew your brother. Thomas was a good man. I am truly sorry for your loss." The words were simple but carried genuine feeling. Lydia felt her throat tighten. "Thank you. Did you know him well?" "Well enough. He worked at the general store, same place I get my supplies. We talked some." Fletcher cleared his throat, still turning his hat in his hands. "He mentioned you were coming. When word came about his passing, I asked around, found out you were still planning to arrive. Thought someone should meet you, explain things proper like." Lydia appreciated the kindness but felt her hope dimming further. "The room above the mercantile has been let, I assume." "It has, but that is not why I am here." Fletcher finally looked directly at her, and she saw something in his expression that was hard to name. Resolve, maybe, or perhaps the same kind of desperate hope she was carrying. "Your brother told me about your situation before he got real sick. About how you had been working as a governess, but the family fell on hard times, let you go. About how things were difficult back east." Lydia felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold. The shame of her circumstances was still raw. "He should not have shared my private affairs. He was worried about you. He made me promise something." Fletcher took a breath, and Lydia saw his hands tighten on his hat brim. "He made me promise that if anything happened to him before you arrived, I would look after you." Make sure you had somewhere safe to stay, someone to help you get on your feet. That is very kind, but I cannot impose on a stranger's charity. It would not be charity. Fletcher's voice took on a stubborn quality. I have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Nothing fancy, but it is doing well enough. I have been needing help with the house, with cooking and such. My mother passed 2 years ago, and I am frankly terrible at keeping things proper. I can offer you room and board in exchange for housekeeping. Fair trade, honest work. Lydia studied him carefully. She had learned to be wary of men offering help that came with hidden prices. But Fletcher's eyes held steady, and there was something fundamentally decent in the set of his jaw, the way he maintained a respectful distance. She thought of her $17, of the long, cold winter ahead, of how few options she truly had. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked quietly. "Because I made a promise to a dying man, and because it is the right thing to do." Fletcher paused, then added with painful honesty, "And because I am lonely out there, if I am being truthful. It would be nice to have someone to talk to besides the horses and cattle. But I swear on my mother's grave, Miss Sawyer, you would be safe. I am not offering anything improper. You would have your own room, your privacy respected. Just honest work in exchange for a roof and meals." The snow was falling harder now, accumulating on Lydia's shoulders and hat. She thought of Thomas, who had always been kind, always tried to take care of her even when he could barely take care of himself. If he had trusted this man enough to extract such a promise, perhaps she could trust him too. "I can cook and clean," she said finally. "I can sew and mend. I am a hard worker, Mr. Thornton." "Fletcher," he corrected, and something in his face relaxed. "Just Fletcher, if you do not mind. And I do not doubt your capabilities, Miss Sawyer. Shall we get you out of this cold? My wagon is just there, and I brought extra blankets for the ride." Weather like this is not usual for San Jose, but it happens sometimes in the winter months. Lydia nodded, and Fletcher immediately took her carpetbag, handling it carefully as if it contained precious things rather than her meager belongings. He led her to a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 patient horses who stood quietly in the falling snow. True to his word, there were thick wool blankets folded on the seat. As Fletcher helped her up, his hand steadying her elbow with careful courtesy, Lydia felt the first small stirring of something that was not quite hope, but was not entirely despair either. Perhaps her brother had left her one final gift after all, in the form of a promise kept by a lonely rancher who seemed as lost as she was. The ride to Fletcher's ranch took nearly an hour through the steadily falling snow. The road, such as it was, wound through rolling hills that would probably be golden with grass in the summer, but now looked like they had been draped in white cotton. Fletcher drove with easy competence, his hands steady on the reins, and Lydia found herself stealing glances at him from beneath her lashes. He was handsome in a rough, unpolished way. There was nothing refined about him, nothing that reminded her of the gentlemen back east with their pressed suits and calculated manners. Fletcher looked like a man who worked with his hands, who understood weather and animals and the rhythm of seasons. Despite her circumstances, or perhaps because of them, Lydia found something reassuring about his solid presence beside her. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, wanting to break the silence that had stretched between them, comfortable but still uncertain. "Started it with my father 8 years ago," Fletcher replied, his voice carrying easily over the creak of the wagon and the soft whisper of snow. "He passed 5 years back. Heart gave out during spring roundup. My mother tried to keep going after that, but losing him took something from her. She faded slow, and then she was gone too." He paused, jaw working. "Been just me since then. I have about 200 head of cattle, a dozen horses. The house is stone, built to last. My father was a stonemason before he decided to try ranching, wanted something that would stand through the years. It sounds like you have built something good, trying to. Some days are easier than others. He glanced at her briefly, then back to the road. What about you? What was Philadelphia like? Lydia pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Crowded, loud. Beautiful in some ways, but hard in others. I was a governess for a family there, the Harrisons. 2 children, sweet girls aged 7 and 9. But Mr. Harrison's business failed and they had to let the staff go. I tried to find another position, but there were too many women like me, all looking for the same few jobs. Thomas wrote and said I should come here, that there were opportunities in California. He was right about that. San Jose is growing fast. People keep coming west looking for new starts. Is that what you were doing? Looking for a new start? Fletcher was quiet for a moment, guiding the horses around a bend in the road. My father was, I suppose. He wanted land of his own, wanted to build something that belonged to him. I was 14 when we came out here from Missouri. Old enough to work like a man, young enough that this place shaped me. I cannot imagine being anywhere else now. The ranch came into view gradually, emerging from the snow-softened landscape like something from a dream. Fletcher had not exaggerated about the house. It was built from pale gray stone, 2 stories tall with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Smoke curled from the chimney, and Lydia realized with a start that someone must have been there recently to keep the fire going. My neighbor, Daniel, comes by to tend the fire and the animals when I am gone, Fletcher explained, seeing her expression. Good man, older fellow who lives about a mile east. His wife passed some years back, and I think he likes having something to do. I left early this morning to meet your stagecoach, but I knew he would keep things warm. Fletcher pulled the wagon up near the porch and jumped down, coming around to help Lydia. His hands were careful at her waist as he lifted her down, setting her gently on her feet. Even through the layers of clothing, she felt the warmth of his touch, the strength in his hands. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with gentleness, with care. Let me show you inside, he said, grabbing her bag and leading the way up the porch steps. The interior of the house was warm and surprisingly neat for a man living alone. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. A solid wooden table stood near the kitchen area, and comfortable-looking furniture was arranged near the fire. Everything was well made but worn, the kind of wear that spoke of use rather than neglect. Your room is upstairs, Fletcher said, moving toward a staircase. There are 3 bedrooms up there. Mine is at the far end of the hall. The middle room was my mother's sewing room, but you can use it if you like. The room at this end, the one overlooking the front, that would be yours. It has the best light in the mornings. Lydia followed him up the stairs, her fatigue suddenly catching up with her. The room he showed her was simply furnished but clean, with a large bed covered in a quilt that looked handmade, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that would indeed catch the morning sun. Someone, probably Fletcher's mother, had sewn curtains in a cheerful yellow fabric that brightened the space. It is perfect, Lydia said softly, and meant it. After weeks of uncertainty, of sleeping in train stations and cheap hotels, this room felt like a sanctuary. Fletcher set her bag down gently. I will let you rest and freshen up. When you are ready, come down and I will fix us some supper. Nothing fancy, but filling. We can talk more about the arrangements, make sure everything is clear and agreeable. He left, closing the door quietly behind him, and Lydia sank onto the bed, her whole body trembling with a release of tension she had not realized she was carrying. She had made it. She was here. She had a place to sleep, work to do, and a chance to rebuild her life. It was more than she had dared hope for when the stagecoach had pulled into San Jose. Later, after she had washed her face and changed into a fresh dress, Lydia made her way downstairs. Fletcher was at the stove, stirring something in a large pot that smelled wonderfully of beef and vegetables. He had shed his heavy coat and was working in his shirt sleeves, and Lydia could not help but notice the way the fabric stretched across his shoulders as he moved. "Stew," he said without turning around, somehow aware of her presence. "I made a big pot yesterday, and it is always better the second day. There is bread in that basket on the table, baked by Daniel's daughter. She takes pity on me sometimes and sends food over." "Should I be offended that I am being replaced before I even start?" Lydia asked, surprised to hear a teasing note in her own voice. Fletcher turned, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. "You will not hear me complain about having two sources of good cooking. Daniel's daughter, Mary, is married with children of her own. She just likes to mother everyone." They sat down to eat, and Lydia found herself relaxing further as they shared the meal. Fletcher was easy to talk to once his initial awkwardness faded. He asked about her journey west, about Philadelphia, about her interests and experiences. In turn, he told her about the ranch, about the rhythms of the work, about his neighbors and the growing community around San Jose. "There is a church social next month," he mentioned as he cleared the plates. "Most of the ranching families attend. It would be a good chance for you to meet people, make some friends. Would people not find it strange, me living here?" Fletcher paused, his hands stilling on the dishes. "I will not lie and say there will not be talk. People always find something to gossip about. But your brother was known in town, and people respected him. If I explain the situation, that I am simply honoring a promise and providing honest employment, most will understand. And those who do not, well, their opinion does not matter much to me. It could hurt your reputation. My reputation will survive. Besides, I am doing nothing wrong, neither are you." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "You needed help and I could provide it. That is all anyone needs to know." Over the following days, Lydia settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose early, as Fletcher did, and prepared breakfast while he tended to the animals. The work was different from what she had known in Philadelphia, more physical and immediate, but she found satisfaction in it. There was something deeply rewarding about baking bread from scratch, about keeping the house warm and clean, about creating order from chaos. Fletcher was respectful to a fault, always knocking before entering a room, always giving her space and privacy. But Lydia began to notice small things about him. The way he paused to pet the barn cat each morning, how he talked to his horses like they were friends who might answer back. The careful way he mended a broken chair leg, taking time to do it properly rather than rushing the job. He was patient and thorough in all things, and she found herself drawn to those qualities. She also noticed how he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention. There was something in those glances that made her heart beat faster, something that spoke of loneliness and longing, and a hunger for connection that mirrored her own. One evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival, they were sitting by the fire after supper. Lydia was mending one of Fletcher's shirts, and he was working on a piece of leather tack, the comfortable silence between them broken only by the crackle of flames and the whisper of thread through fabric. "Can I ask you something personal?" Fletcher said suddenly. Lydia looked up, needle poised. "Of course. Why did you never marry? A woman like you, educated and capable, I would have thought you would have had suitors." She felt heat rise to her cheeks but appreciated his directness. "There was someone once, back in Philadelphia, a young lawyer named Edward. We were engaged for 6 months. What happened? He decided he wanted someone with better connections, more money, someone who could help his career. The words still stung, even though it had been over a year. I was just a governess with no family wealth or social standing. I was not enough. Fletcher's hands stilled on the leather. Then he was a fool, perhaps, or perhaps he was simply practical. There is nothing practical about throwing away a good woman for social climbing. Fletcher's voice was hard with judgment. You are worth 10 of whatever society woman he ended up with. Lydia's throat tightened at the conviction in his voice. You barely know me. I know enough. I have watched you these past 2 weeks. You work hard, you are kind, you are honest. You have grace even when things are difficult. He paused, then added quietly, Your Edward was a damned fool, and I am not sorry he let you go because it brought you here. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Lydia set down her mending, her hands trembling slightly. Fletcher. I am not saying this to make you uncomfortable, he said quickly. I just want you to know that you are valued here, that I see you, truly see you, and I am grateful you came. Something shifted in that moment. Some invisible line crossed. Lydia felt it in the way Fletcher looked at her, in the sudden awareness of every breath between them. This was no longer simply an arrangement of convenience. Something deeper was growing here, something that frightened and excited her in equal measure. Winter deepened around the ranch, and San Jose saw more snow, unusual storms that turned the landscape into something foreign and beautiful. Lydia and Fletcher were often confined to the house, working side by side on indoor tasks. She taught him how to make proper bread, laughing at his frustrated attempts to knead the dough correctly. He showed her how to cure leather, his hands guiding hers through the process with a patience that made her pulse race. They talked endlessly, sharing stories from their pasts, dreams for their futures, opinions on everything from politics to poetry. Lydia discovered that Fletcher had educated himself through borrowed books and newspapers, that beneath his rough exterior was a keen mind and a thoughtful soul. He discovered that she had a dry sense of humor that matched his own, and that her laughter, when he could coax it from her, was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. Daniel visited often, bringing news from neighboring ranches and from town. He was a weathered man in his 60s with kind eyes and a knowing smile that suggested he saw more than he said. His daughter Mary came once, ostensibly to bring a pie but really to inspect the woman living at Fletcher's ranch. Lydia endured the scrutiny with grace, and by the end of the visit, Mary was inviting her to a quilting circle in town. She likes you, Fletcher said after they left. That is good. Mary is well respected in the community. Her approval will help quiet any gossip. Was there much gossip? Fletcher shrugged. Some, but less than I expected. I think people are just curious more than anything. San Jose is growing, but it is still small enough that everyone knows everyone's business. On a particularly cold evening in late January, a storm rolled in with surprising ferocity. The wind howled around the stone house, and snow fell so thick that Lydia could not see the barn from the kitchen window. Fletcher had been outside checking on the animals, and when he finally came back in, he was covered in snow and shivering despite his heavy coat. Storm is getting bad, he said through chattering teeth. I secured everything as best I could, but this one is going to be rough. Lydia immediately sprang into action, helping him out of his wet coat and pushing him toward the fire. She brought him hot coffee and a blanket, fussing over him with a concern that surprised them both. I am fine, he protested, but he was smiling. Just cold. You need to get out of those wet clothes. Go change while I make something hot to eat. When he came back down in dry clothes, his hair still damp and tousled, Lydia had soup heating on the stove and more coffee brewing. They ate together, listening to the storm rage outside, grateful for the solid stone walls that kept them safe and warm. "My father built this house to last through anything," Fletcher said, echoing his earlier words. "I never appreciated it more than in moments like this. He did good work. You all did. We tried." Fletcher set down his empty bowl and looked at her seriously. "Lydia, there is something I need to say, and this storm seems like as good a time as any." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "When your brother asked me to look after you, I said yes because it was the right thing to do. I did not expect." He paused, searching for words. "I did not expect you. The reality of you, I mean. You have been here almost a month now, and every day I find myself more grateful that you came, more aware of your presence, more." "More what?" Lydia whispered. "More in love with you." The words came out rough, almost painful. "I know I should not say it. I know it puts you in an impossible position. You are here because you needed help, not because you were looking for romance. But I cannot keep pretending that what I feel is simple gratitude or companionship. It is more than that, Lydia. So much more." Lydia's breath caught in her throat. She had known something was building between them, had felt it in every glance and touch and shared silence. But hearing him say it aloud made it real and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "I do not expect you to feel the same," Fletcher continued, his voice urgent now. "I just needed you to know the truth, and I need you to know that it changes nothing about our arrangement. You are still welcome here, still have your place, regardless of what you feel or do not feel for me. I will never use your circumstances to pressure you. I swear that on everything I hold sacred." "Fletcher, stop," Lydia said softly. He fell silent, watching her with those storm-colored eyes. She took a breath, finding her courage. "You are not alone in your feelings. I have been trying to deny them, trying to convince myself it was just gratitude or relief at finding safety. But it is more than that. You make me laugh. You challenge me. You see me, really see me in a way no one else ever has. I wake up looking forward to our conversations. I find excuses to be near you. I think about you when I should be thinking about other things." "Lydia." Her name was a prayer on his lips. "I am frightened," she admitted. "I was hurt before badly, and our situation is complicated. If this goes wrong, I have nowhere else to go." "It will not go wrong." Fletcher moved closer, kneeling beside her chair. "I cannot promise that life will always be easy or that we will never disagree, but I can promise that I will never betray your trust. I will never make you feel less than you are. I will spend every day trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me," Lydia said, reaching out to touch his face, feeling the roughness of his stubble beneath her fingers. "We deserve each other." Fletcher turned his head to press a kiss into her palm, and the tenderness of the gesture made her heart ache. Then he was standing, pulling her up with him, and they were kissing with all the pent-up longing of the past weeks. His lips were warm and gentle at first, then more insistent as she responded, her hands fisting in his shirt to pull him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this properly. I want to court you, marry you if you will have me. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours." "Yes," Lydia said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes to all of it." They stood there in the firelight, holding each other while the storm raged outside, and Lydia thought about how far she had come. She had arrived in snow with only hope left, a desperate woman fleeing a failed past. But Fletcher had been waiting with faith enough for both of them. And together, they had found something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. The storm lasted 3 days, keeping them mostly housebound. They spent the time talking, planning, stealing kisses that grew longer and more heated with each passing hour. Fletcher was respectful of propriety, never pushing for more than she was willing to give, but the desire between them was palpable, building like the drifts of snow outside. On the fourth day, the storm broke and the sun emerged, turning the snow-covered landscape into a glittering wonderland. Fletcher bundled Lydia into warm clothes and took her out to see the ranch properly. Everything was transformed, magical in the winter light. He showed her where the creek ran, now frozen solid. He pointed out the boundaries of his land, explaining his plans for the spring. He introduced her properly to each horse, laughing at her delight when one nuzzled her pocket looking for treats. "I want to take you into town," he said as they walked back to the house. "I want to talk to the preacher, make arrangements. I want everyone to know my intentions are honorable. People will still talk. Let them. I am proud to love you, Lydia. I will not hide it or apologize for it." They went to San Jose the following week, the roads finally clear enough for travel. Fletcher drove them in the wagon, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. At the church, they met with Reverend Matthews, a kindly man in his 50s who had known Fletcher since he was a boy. "I want to marry this woman," Fletcher told him directly, "as soon as can be properly arranged." Reverend Matthews looked between them, and Lydia saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "This is the young woman staying at your ranch, Miss Sawyer." "Yes. She arrived in December with nowhere to go. I offered her employment, but we have found something more. I love her, and she has agreed to marry me." "There has been some talk in town," the Reverend said carefully. "I know, which is why I want to marry her quickly and properly. I want no question about my intentions or her reputation." The Reverend turned to Lydia. "Is this truly what you want, my dear? You do not feel pressured?" "No pressure at all," Lydia said firmly. "Fletcher is the best man I have ever known. I love him freely and want to build a life with him." Reverend Matthews smiled. "Then I will be happy to perform the ceremony. Given the circumstances, I suggest we do it soon. Perhaps in 3 weeks. That will give time to post the banns and for you to invite whoever you wish to attend, but not so long as to fuel more gossip." They agreed, and Fletcher insisted on buying Lydia a new dress for the wedding from the finest shop in San Jose. She protested the expense, but he was adamant. "You will wear something beautiful, something that makes you feel as special as you are," he insisted. "This is not up for debate." The dressmaker, a French woman named Madame Dupont, took one look at them and understood immediately what was needed. She suggested a dress in deep blue silk that would complement Lydia's coloring, with delicate ivory lace at the collar and sleeves. "It will be ready in 2 weeks," she promised. "And Mademoiselle will be the most beautiful bride San Jose has ever seen." As they left the shop, Fletcher took Lydia's hand openly, not caring who saw. They walked down the main street, stopping to introduce her to various shopkeepers and neighbors. Some people were warm and welcoming, others more reserved, but Fletcher's open affection and obvious pride in her made a statement that could not be ignored. At the general store where Thomas had worked, they met Mr. Patterson, the owner. He was a thin man with spectacles and a kind face that grew sad when he saw Lydia. "You must be Thomas's sister," he said immediately. "I can see the resemblance. He was a good man, and I was sorry to lose him. He talked about you often." "Thank you," Lydia said, her voice thick with emotion. "I wish I could have arrived in time to see him one last time. He knew you were coming. That gave him comfort at the end." Mr. Patterson looked at Fletcher. "I am glad you kept your promise to him, Fletcher. Thomas worried about his sister, wanted to know she would be cared for." "She is cared for," Fletcher said simply. "We are to be married in 3 weeks." Mr. Patterson's eyebrows rose, but then he smiled. "Well then, congratulations to you both. Thomas would have been pleased, I think. He thought highly of you, Fletcher." The word spread quickly through San Jose that Fletcher Thornton was marrying the woman living at his ranch. By the time they returned home that evening, Lydia felt certain that everyone in town knew their business. But instead of the judgment she had feared, most people had seemed happy for them, offering congratulations and well wishes. "That went better than I expected," she admitted as they sat down to supper. "People are generally decent, given the chance," Fletcher said. "And I think they could see that what we have is real. Love like this, you cannot fake it." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Mary insisted on throwing Lydia a small party to welcome her properly into the community. Daniel helped Fletcher clean and prepare the house, teasing him mercilessly about his lovesick behavior. Fletcher bore it all with good humor, too happy to be embarrassed. Lydia went to her final dress fitting and nearly cried when she saw herself in the mirror. The blue silk transformed her, and Madame Dupont had added extra special touches, including tiny seed pearls sewn into the lace. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever owned. "He will not be able to breathe when he sees you," Madame Dupont said with satisfaction. The night before the wedding, Lydia lay in her bed unable to sleep, excitement and nervousness warring within her. Tomorrow she would become Fletcher's wife. Tomorrow her life would change completely. She thought about how far she had come, from that desperate woman stepping off the stage coach in the snow to this moment, on the brink of marrying a man she loved deeply. A soft knock at her door made her sit up. "Yes, it is me," Fletcher's voice came through the wood. "Can I talk to you for a moment? I will stay out here. I just need to say something." Lydia wrapped a shawl around her nightgown and went to the door, opening it to find Fletcher standing in the hallway in his nightshirt and trousers, his hair mussed and his feet bare. "I could not sleep," he admitted. "I kept thinking about tomorrow, about you, about how lucky I am." "I could not sleep either," Lydia confessed. "I want you to know something. Tomorrow, when you become my wife, I am not just gaining a partner or a companion. I am gaining everything. You brought light into this house, into my life. You made me remember what it feels like to hope, to look forward to tomorrow. I will spend the rest of my life trying to give you even a fraction of what you have given me." Lydia felt tears spill down her cheeks. "You already have. You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me respect when I expected to be treated as a burden. You gave me love when I thought I would never trust anyone enough to love again." Fletcher reached through the doorway to wipe away her tears with his thumb. "No more crying. Tomorrow is going to be the happiest day of our lives. Well, one of them. I intend for us to have many happy days. Tomorrow cannot come fast enough. For me either, but I will let you rest, or try to anyway." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Sleep well, my love. The next time we speak, it will be our wedding day." The wedding took place on a crisp February morning with sunshine breaking through the clouds like a blessing. The small church was filled with neighbors and friends, more people than Lydia had expected. She stood in the back room in her blue dress, clutching a small bouquet of winter flowers that Mary had somehow managed to find, and tried to calm her racing heart. "You look beautiful, dear," Mary said, adjusting Lydia's hair one final time. "Fletcher is a lucky man. I am the lucky one. You are lucky together. That is how it should be." The music started, and Lydia walked down the aisle alone, having no father or brother to give her away, but she did not feel alone. The faces of the congregation were warm and welcoming, and at the end of the aisle stood Fletcher, looking handsome in a new suit. His eyes locked on her with such love and awe that she felt her remaining nervousness melt away. When she reached him, he took her hand and whispered, "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony with warmth and dignity. They spoke their vows clearly, promises made before God and witnesses that they would love and cherish each other for all their days. When Fletcher slid the simple gold band onto her finger, His hands were steady, but she could see emotion shining in his eyes. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Matthews said with a smile. Fletcher pulled her close and kissed her thoroughly, to the laughter and applause of the congregation. When they finally broke apart, both flushed and smiling, the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Lydia felt a joy so complete it was almost overwhelming. The reception was held at the church hall, with food contributed by various neighbors. There was music and dancing, and Fletcher barely let Lydia out of his arms, keeping her close as they moved through the crowd accepting congratulations and well wishes. Daniel toasted them with heartfelt emotion. "I have known Fletcher since he came to this valley as a boy. I watched him grow into a good man, watched him struggle with loneliness after his parents passed. I am happier than I can say to see him find someone who understands what a treasure he is. To Fletcher and Lydia, may your years together be long and full of love." As the sun began to set, Fletcher leaned close to Lydia's ear. "What do you say we go home, Mrs. Thornton?" The name sent a thrill through her. Mrs. Thornton. She was truly his now, and he was hers. They said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon, which someone had decorated with ribbons and bells. The ride home felt both endless and too short, anticipation building between them with each passing mile. At the house, Fletcher lifted Lydia from the wagon and, to her surprise, carried her up the porch steps and through the door. "Tradition," he explained with a grin. "You are supposed to carry your bride over the threshold." He set her down gently in the main room, and for a moment they just stood there, looking at each other in the firelight, the reality of what they had done finally sinking in. "I love you," Fletcher said, his voice rough with emotion. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond if such things are possible." "I love you too," Lydia replied, reaching up to touch his face. "Thank you for waiting for me, for having faith when I had only hope." "We had enough between us," Fletcher said. "We will always have enough between us." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Lydia felt the last of her walls crumble. This man was her husband, her home, her future. She had arrived in San Jose with nothing but a carpetbag and desperate hope, and she had found everything she had ever wanted without knowing she wanted it. That night, in the bedroom that was now theirs together, Fletcher made love to his wife with tenderness and passion, showing her with his body what his words could not quite capture. Lydia gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back, and found a connection deeper than she had imagined possible. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Lydia thought about the strange path that had led her here. If Thomas had not gotten sick, if she had not been desperate enough to come west anyway, if Fletcher had not been the kind of man to keep a deathbed promise, none of this would have happened. All those painful moments, all that loss and fear and uncertainty had led her exactly where she was meant to be. "What are you thinking?" Fletcher asked, his hand stroking her hair. "That I am grateful for everything, even the hard parts, because they brought me to you. I am grateful too. And I promise you, Lydia, I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I could never regret this. Never." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lydia slept without fear, without worry, cradled in the arms of the man who loved her. Spring came to the valley in a rush of green and gold, the snow melting away to reveal the rolling hills in all their glory. Lydia threw herself into making the ranch house truly a home, adding small touches that made Fletcher smile every time he noticed them. Curtains sewn from cheerful fabric, wildflowers in jars on the table, the smell of fresh bread greeting him when he came in from working the cattle. She also learned the rhythm of ranch life, helping where she could. Fletcher taught her to ride properly, patient through her initial nervousness and delighted by her eventual enthusiasm. Together, they would ride out to check the herds, and Lydia would pack a lunch so they could eat under the wide California sky, talking about everything and nothing. The community embraced her fully now that she was Fletcher's wife. She joined Mary's quilting circle and became friends with several other ranch wives. But her favorite times were still the quiet evenings at home, just her and Fletcher, talking by the fire or working side by side on the endless tasks a ranch required. In late summer, Lydia began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Fletcher, choosing a quiet evening after supper to share the news. "I have something to tell you," she said, unable to keep the smile from her face. Fletcher looked up from the harness he was mending, immediately alert to her tone. "What is it?" "I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." The harness fell from his hands as the words registered. His face went through a rapid series of expressions, shock, joy, wonder, before settling on pure happiness. "A baby, truly, truly." "I think the baby will come in March, maybe early April." Fletcher crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "A baby," he kept repeating. "We are going to have a baby. You are happy then." Happy does not begin to cover it. "I am beyond happy, I am." He set her down carefully, suddenly concerned. "Are you well? Do you need anything? Should you be resting?" Lydia laughed at his instant protectiveness. "I am fine, healthy and strong, but you are going to have to let me actually do things, Fletcher. I cannot sit idle for the next 7 months." "We will see about that," he said, only half joking. True to his word, Fletcher became almost comically protective. He would not let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest in the afternoons, and fussed over her meals to make sure she was eating enough. Lydia found it both exasperating and endearing, evidence of how much he already loved their unborn child. As fall gave way to winter, her belly grew round and full. Fletcher would sit with her in the evenings, his hand resting on her stomach, marveling at every movement of the baby inside her. They argued playfully about names, about whether the baby would be a boy or girl, about whose eyes or nose the child might have. "I hope the baby has your strength," Fletcher said one night, his hand warm on her belly. "I hope the baby has your heart," Lydia replied. Winter returned, though not as harshly as the previous year. Lydia thought often about how different this winter was from the last, how much her life had changed in 12 short months. Last February, she had been alone and afraid, stepping off a stagecoach into the snow with nothing but hope to sustain her. This February, she was surrounded by love, secure in her home, her marriage, her place in the community, waiting for a child who was already deeply wanted. The baby came on a mild March evening when the first wildflowers were just beginning to bloom. Lydia's labor was long but not unusually difficult, attended by Mary and Dr. Williams, who had ridden out from San Jose. Fletcher paced the downstairs, wearing a path in the floor until finally he heard the thin, strong cry of his child. Mary came down beaming. "You have a son, Fletcher, a healthy, beautiful boy, and Lydia is doing well, tired but well. You can come up now." Fletcher took the stairs 2 at a time and burst into the bedroom to find Lydia propped up against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up as he entered, and the smile she gave him held all the love in the world. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Fletcher approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face peeking from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that were still the indefinite blue of all newborns, but his features were already distinct, a perfect blend of both his parents. He is perfect, Fletcher breathed. Absolutely perfect. Would you like to hold him? Carefully, as if the baby were made of glass, Fletcher took his son into his arms. The weight of the child, solid and real, made something shift in his chest. This was his son, his and Lydia's, a new life they had created together out of love. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I am your father. And I promise you, I will do everything in my power to keep you safe and happy and loved." "What should we name him?" Lydia asked. They had discussed many names but had not settled on one, wanting to wait until they saw the baby. Fletcher looked down at his son, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. About Thomas, who had brought them together even in death. About faith and hope and promises kept. "What about Thomas?" he suggested. "For your brother, he would have loved to meet his nephew." Tears filled Lydia's eyes. "Thomas Fletcher Thornton. It is perfect. They called him Tommy, and he was a good baby, easy and content." Fletcher proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to walk with Tommy when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just watching his son sleep with wonder on his face. The ranch prospered as the months passed. Fletcher hired a hand to help with the cattle, a young man named Jack who was hardworking and honest. This freed up more of Fletcher's time to spend with his growing family. Tommy grew from a tiny newborn into a sturdy baby with his father's eyes and his mother's smile, curious about everything and fearless in a way that made both parents' hearts leap. On their second anniversary, Fletcher surprised Lydia with a gift, a beautiful wooden cradle he had carved himself, working on it secretly in the barn. "For the next one," he said with a grin. "You are awfully confident there will be a next one," Lydia teased. "I am hopeful. But even if it is just the three of us, I will count myself blessed beyond measure." There was a next one, though. A daughter born 2 years after Tommy, in the spring when everything was blooming. They named her Rose, and she had her mother's auburn hair and her father's stubborn determination. Tommy was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help to hold her, to show her his toys. Fletcher built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen, planning for the future, for more children if they were blessed, for grandchildren someday far down the road. The stone walls his father had built held them all, a fortress against the world, a sanctuary of love and family. Years passed in a blur of joy and work, of challenges met and overcome. The ranch grew, their herd multiplying, their reputation for quality cattle spreading throughout the region. Fletcher became a respected member of the community, serving on the town council, helping to establish a school in San Jose. Lydia was known for her kindness and her strength, always ready to help a neighbor in need, always with a meal for someone who was struggling or a listening ear for those who needed to talk. They had 2 more children, another boy they named Daniel after their dear friend and neighbor, and then 1 more daughter, Sophia, who came as a surprise when Lydia thought her childbearing years were done. Each child was cherished, loved fiercely, raised with the same values of hard work, kindness, and integrity that Fletcher and Lydia held dear. On their 10th anniversary, they rode out to the spot where Fletcher had first told Lydia he loved her, that night during the snowstorm so many years ago. They left the children with Mary, who was happy to watch them, and spent the afternoon just the 2 of them, remembering. "You ever think about that day?" Lydia asked, sitting beside Fletcher on the blanket he had spread on the ground. "When you met me at the stagecoach, all the time. I was so nervous. I had practiced what I would say, how I would convince you to take a chance on a strange rancher with a dubious offer. I was terrified. I had $17 and nowhere to go. You were my last hope, though I did not know it yet. You were my last hope, too." I did not realize how lonely I was until you arrived and filled all the empty spaces." Fletcher took her hand, his thumb stroking over her knuckles in the familiar gesture that still made her heart flutter. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, Lydia. Thank you for seeing past the rough edges to whatever was underneath. Thank you for keeping your promise to Thomas. Thank you for having faith enough for both of us when I arrived with only hope left. We made something good together, did we not?" Lydia looked out over the valley, golden in the afternoon sun, then back at her husband, still as handsome to her now as he had been that first day, though his dark hair was starting to show threads of silver and fine lines crinkled around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. "We made something extraordinary," she corrected. "A life, a family, a home. Everything I never knew I wanted." Fletcher leaned in to kiss her, slow and sweet, the kiss of two people who knew each other completely and loved what they knew. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, just as he had that first night they confessed their feelings. "Here is to the next 10 years," he said, "and the 10 after that and all the years to come." "To all the years to come," Lydia agreed. They did have many more years together. They watched their children grow into capable, compassionate adults. Tommy took over the ranch when Fletcher's back started bothering him too much for the heavy work, proving himself a worthy successor. Rose married a teacher and moved to Sacramento, but visited often with her children. Daniel became a lawyer, the first in the family to attend university, making his parents burst with pride. Little Sophia stayed closest to home, marrying the son of a neighboring rancher and settling just 5 miles away. The stone house filled with grandchildren, their laughter echoing off the walls Fletcher's father had built so long ago. Fletcher and Lydia became the patriarch and matriarch of a large, loving family. The kind of family neither had known growing up. The kind of family they had built together from nothing but hope and faith and stubborn determination. On warm evenings, Fletcher and Lydia would sit on the porch, watching the sun set over the valley, holding hands as they had for decades, still finding comfort in each other's touch. They would reminisce about the early days, about the challenges they had faced and overcome, about the love that had sustained them through it all. "You remember what you said to me once?" Lydia asked on one such evening. They were both in their 60s now, their hair mostly gray, their faces lined with the evidence of years lived fully. "About how I arrived with only hope. I said you arrived in snow with only hope left, and I had faith enough for both of us. You did have faith. In me, in us, in what we could build together. I do not think I ever properly thanked you for that." "You thanked me every day," Fletcher said, bringing her hand to his lips to kiss it gently. "Every morning I woke up next to you, every child we raised together, every moment of joy and even the difficult times we faced as a team. That was thanks enough and more. I love you, Fletcher Thornton. I have loved you from that first winter, when you were just a stranger keeping a promise to my dying brother. I loved you when you made me laugh even when I thought I had forgotten how. I loved you on our wedding day, when we made vows before God and everyone. I loved you when you held our firstborn son with tears streaming down your face, and I love you now after all these years, more than I did even then. And I love you, Lydia Thornton, born Sawyer. You made me believe in second chances and new beginnings. You took a lonely rancher with more dreams than sense and helped him build something that will last beyond our lifetimes. Our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, this life. It is all because you were brave enough to step off that stage coach into the snow and trust a stranger." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned pink and orange and purple, the colors of a California sunset that never got old no matter how many thousands of times they had seen it. Inside the house, They could hear the sounds of family, of their children and grandchildren who had come for Sunday supper, preparing to leave for their own homes. Tommy came out onto the porch, his own children trailing behind him. "We are heading out, Pa, Ma. Thank you for supper." "You are welcome anytime," Fletcher said, as he always did. "You know that." "We do. See you next week." One by one, their family said goodbye, hugs and kisses exchanged, promises made to visit soon. Finally, it was just Fletcher and Lydia again, alone in the house that had held so much life, so much love. "Tired?" Fletcher asked. "A little. But it is a good tired, the kind that comes from a day well spent." They went inside, banking the fire and locking the doors, moving through the familiar routine that had become second nature over the decades. In their bedroom, the one they had shared since their wedding night, they got ready for bed with the easy intimacy of two people who had spent a lifetime together. Lying in the darkness, Fletcher pulled Lydia close, and she settled against him with a sigh of contentment. This was home right here in this man's arms. Always had been from that first moment he had helped her down from the wagon in the snow. "Thank you," Fletcher whispered into the darkness. "For what? For choosing me, for loving me, for building this life with me, for everything. Thank you for choosing me too, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for waiting for me with faith when all I had left was hope. We made a good team, the best team." They drifted off to sleep, as they had for 40 years together. The ranch continued to prosper under Tommy's management, and Fletcher lived to see great-grandchildren playing in the yard where his own children had played. He and Lydia grew old together, side by side, their love deepening with each passing year into something rare and precious. Fletcher passed first, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78 with Lydia holding his hand. His last words to her were, "Wait for me. I will find you again wherever we go next." Lydia lived 2 more years, long enough to see Tommy's eldest son take over the ranch, ensuring that the legacy would continue. She spent those years surrounded by family, telling stories of the old days, of her arrival in San Jose in the snow, of the cowboy who had kept a promise and changed her life. When her time came, she was ready. Her last conscious thought was of Fletcher, of his smile, of his hands, of the life they had built together from nothing but hope and faith and love. The family buried her next to Fletcher on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the shade of an oak tree they had planted together on their first anniversary. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates, but also an inscription that Tommy had chosen. She arrived with hope. He waited with faith. Together they built everything. The ranch continued through the generations, the stone house standing strong just as Fletcher's father had intended, sheltering great-great-grandchildren and beyond. The story of Fletcher and Lydia became family legend, told and retold, of the woman who stepped off a stage-coach into the snow with nothing and the cowboy, who had kept a promise to a dying man. Their love had been the foundation upon which everything else was built, a love that had started with hope and faith, and had grown into something that transcended their own lives, living on in their descendants, in the land they had cultivated, in the home they had made together. It was a love story fitting for the Wild West, for that era of new beginnings and second chances, of people brave enough to travel across a continent in search of something better. Lydia had found what she was searching for, though she had not known what shape it would take. Fletcher had found what he had been missing, though he had been resigned to living without it. Together, they had created a legacy that would last for generations, all because a lonely cowboy had kept a promise and a desperate woman had been brave enough to accept help from a stranger. All because hope and faith, when combined, were powerful enough to build a life, a family, a love that would echo through time. Years after they were both gone, their great-great-granddaughter would find a box in the attic of the old stone house. Inside were letters, carefully preserved, that Fletcher and Lydia had written to each other during the rare times they were apart. There were also journals, Lydia's neat handwriting chronicling their life together, Fletcher's rougher script detailing the growth of the ranch and his family. But most precious was a single page, written in Lydia's hand, dated their 50th wedding anniversary. I came to San Jose in the winter of 1881 with nothing but a carpetbag and hope that was almost extinguished. I was alone, afraid, and certain that my life was over before it had truly begun. But waiting for me, though neither of us knew it yet, was a man who believed in keeping promises, in doing what was right, in having faith even when circumstances seemed impossible. Fletcher gave me a home when I had none, work when I needed purpose, respect when I expected nothing. But more than that, he gave me his heart, freely and without reservation. He taught me to trust again, to love again, to believe again. Our life together has not always been easy. We have faced droughts and storms, loss and hardship, the trials that all lives contain. But we have faced them together, and that has made all the difference. I write this so that our children, grandchildren, and those who come after will know that love is possible even in the darkest moments. That hope, when nurtured by faith, can bloom into something extraordinary. That a chance encounter on a snowy day can change everything. Fletcher once told me he had faith enough for both of us, and he did. His faith carried us through until my hope could grow strong again, until we could build something together that neither of us could have built alone. This is the legacy I want to leave. That love endures, that promises matter, that faith and hope together can create miracles. This ranch, this family, this life we have built, it all started with a cowboy who kept his word and a woman who dared to trust him. To all who come after us, remember this. Remember that the greatest things often start with the smallest acts of kindness. Remember that love is worth every risk. Remember that home is not a place, but the people who stand beside you through everything. Fletcher and I arrived at our life together from very different paths, but we walked the rest of the way side by side. That is all anyone can ask for and more than most ever find. We found it, and it was everything. With all my love for all time, Lydia Sawyer Thornton. The stone house still stands, weathered but strong, a testament to the love that began there in the winter of 1881. The valley still turns golden in the summer sun, and snow still falls occasionally in the winter, though never quite as dramatically as it did that day when Lydia Sawyer arrived with only hope left and found Fletcher Thornton waiting with faith enough for both. Their story became part of the fabric of San Jose, California, one of countless tales of the Wild West, of people brave enough to travel into the unknown, to take chances on strangers, to build new lives from nothing but determination and dreams. But to those who knew them, who were loved by them, who carried their legacy forward, it was more than just another story. It was a reminder that love finds us in unexpected ways, in unexpected places, often when we need it most. That faith and hope, when joined together, are powerful enough to overcome any obstacle. That a promise kept can change lives, that kindness matters, that opening your heart even when it has been broken can lead to the greatest joys. Fletcher and Lydia's love story did not end with their deaths. It continued in every descendant who valued family over fortune, who kept their word no matter the cost, who believed in love even when it seemed impossible. It continued in the stone house that still sheltered their family, in the land they had cultivated, in the stories told around dinner tables for generations. She had arrived in snow with only hope left. He had been waiting with faith enough for both. Together, They had built a love that would never truly end, that would live on as long as there were people to remember that once, in the wild west of California, a desperate woman and a lonely cowboy found each other and created everything.